I'm sad to say that earlier this week, the great state of Minnesota and the world lost a truly good man, which is why for the second time in just a few weeks, I'm breaking my rule of only doing political figure series on current people running for office, and I'm going to talk about my former state representative, the late, great Rick Nolan. Rick Nolan was born December 17th, 1943 in Brainerd, Minnesota. Being a true Minnesota boy, he graduated from Brainerd High School and went on to get his undergraduate from the University of Minnesota. He did some postgraduate work in education at St. Cloud State, but he did venture off a little bit to do some postgraduate work in public administration and policy at the University of Maryland. He got into politics early. One of his first jobs was serving as a staff assistant to another Minnesota favorite son, Walter Mondale. Just to remind y'all, Mondale was the last guy that Minnesota donated to a presidential ticket to, help us save the world from an existential menace, and y'all picked Reagan. Thanks for that. Now, don't get me wrong, being able to subject you all to our Minnesota nice passive-aggressive Catholic guilt saying, "I told you so," is nice and all, but that doesn't change the fact that even we still have to live with all of this. Seriously, it's the end of October in Minnesota. I'm out here in a t-shirt sweating. Well, women are out there sweating to try to fight the same battle that they already won in 1972. And just so y'all haven't forgot, the Carter Mondale administration put solar panels on the roof of the White House, and your boy Reagan took them off, and we're still a little fucking salty about all that. Anyway, Rick was a social studies teacher in Royalton, Minnesota for a few years before running for the Minnesota State House of Representatives in 1968. He served a couple terms there, and then in 1972, he ran for Minnesota's 6th congressional district and lost, but then ran for it again in 1974, and this time he won, serving 3 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. After leaving Congress, he went into the business world for a while also still serving in some public and private entities and serving in local politics. He did end up owning a small sawmill up in Emily, Minnesota, which his family still owns and operates today. But I guess after so many years of playing with his wood in the sawmill, he got bored and decided that he was going to go back to Congress. So yeah, he took a 32-year sabbatical in his congressional career, which is the second longest in congressional history. In 2012, he ran again for Minnesota's 8th, which is my district, and he won, serving until 2019 when he retired. Nolan was able to retain his seniority in Congress even after his 3-decade-long hiatus and wasted no time putting that power to work for northern Minnesota. When you think of people in Congress giving fiery, pointed speeches in support of the working class, TikTok videos of Jasmine Crockett and AOC and Katie Porter spring to mind. But long before it could be captured by TikTok, Rick Nolan's fiery talks were ticking off the people on the top as he fought for the middle class. Nolan passionately and publicly supported taxing the ultra-wealthy and closing tax loopholes that encouraged them to offshore and send American jobs overseas. He called out his fellow colleagues and said that it's time for Congress to live in the real world and introduced a bill that would have withheld pay from Congress members if the government went into shutdown. And while he supported the Affordable Care Act, he was advocating for single-payer healthcare before it was cool. And speaking of being ahead of the curve on healthcare and his progressive credentials, he was one of the first people to support Bernie Sanders' bid for the presidency. He was a big proponent of campaign finance reform and introduced legislation that would have overturned Citizens United, but of course it didn't pass. He was a strong advocate for peace and international cooperation. He even traveled with Barack Obama to Cuba and helped restore international relations between the U.S. and the island nation. He spoke out against increasing military presence in Iraq and Syria. He was calling for increased recognition of Palestinian rights before it was cool. He worked on lowering education and textbook costs for students. He was on the House Agriculture Committee and fought for farmers. The list goes on and on and on. He was truly a congressman for the people, and his record shows it. He was a great man, and he decided to retire from Congress in 2018, and we replaced him with Pete fucking Stauber. It's just fucking insulting. Pete Stauber has been an absolute stain on the legacy of Minnesota 8th that Nolan had left him. And it pains me to say that on October 18th, 2024, just a few short weeks before the election, our beloved Rick Nolan passed away, robbed of his opportunity to see Jen Schultz wipe the stain that is Pete Stauber off of his former seat. But while Rick has moved on, his legacy will live immortal, and I cannot think of any greater way to honor his life and that legacy than to put somebody in his seat that he would be proud to see sitting there this November. And that person is, without a doubt, Jen Schultz. I have personally met her. She's been on our podcast. You can go watch that. She is an incredible woman. Just like Nolan, she's an educator, and she has also spent her life serving the great state of Minnesota and teaching people and fighting for the working and lower class. Just like Nolan, she's not afraid of bipartisanism, and not only does she want to see a government that works for its people, she wants to be a part of the solution of making a government that works for its people. Because of all of that, I cannot think of anything more that the people of Minnesota's 8th can do as a better send-off for Rick than sending her to sit in his seat. As one of his former constituents, I can genuinely say that, Rick, you will be missed, and we are eternally grateful for everything you did for our district, for our state, and for our country. May you rest in peace.